My administration is acting with unprecedented speed to fix the disasters we've inherited from a totally inept group of people and to solve every single crisis facing our country. This begins with confronting the economic chaos caused by the failed policies of the last administration. Over the past 4 years, our government racked up $8 trillion in wasteful deficit spending and inflicted nation-wrecking energy restrictions, crippling regulations, and hidden taxes like never before. The result is the worst inflation crisis in modern history and sky-high interest rates for our citizens and even throughout the world. Food prices and the price of almost every other thing known to mankind went through the roof. President Biden totally lost control of what was going on in our country, but in particular with our high inflation economy and at our border. Because of these ruinous policies, total government spending this year is $1.5 trillion higher than was projected to occur when I left office just 4 years ago.
President Trump took his reality-bending and self-serving show on the road by speaking remotely to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. In an attempt to baselessly blame every problem on the outgoing administration, he reeled off a list of things his campaign rallies eat up, but forgot that this crowd isn't voting.
The inflation rate we are inheriting remains 50% higher than the historic target. It was the highest inflation probably in the history of our country. That's why from the moment I took office, I've taken rapid action to reverse each and every one of these radical left policies that created this calamity, in particular with immigration, crime, and inflation. On day one, I signed an executive order directing every member of my cabinet to marshal all powers at their disposal to defeat inflation and reduce the cost of daily life. I imposed a federal hiring freeze, a federal regulation freeze, a foreign aid freeze, and I created the new Department of Government Efficiency. I terminated the ridiculous and incredibly wasteful Green New Deal. I call it the Green New Scam. Withdrew from the one-sided Paris Climate Accord and ended the insane and costly electric vehicle mandate. We're going to let people buy the car they want to buy.
No mention of how his mishandling of COVID left the country dying and unprepared for the supply chain issues that he couldn't have cared less about handling. He was there to sell and threaten, whichever he felt would work in the moment.
My message to every business in the world is very simple. Come make your product in America, and we will give you among the lowest taxes of any nation on earth. We're bringing them down very substantially, even from the original Trump tax cuts. But if you don't make your product in America, which is your prerogative, then very simply you will have to pay a tariff, differing amounts, but a tariff which will direct hundreds of billions of dollars and even trillions of dollars into our treasury to strengthen our economy and pay down debt. Under the Trump administration, there will be no better place on earth to create jobs, build factories, or grow a company than right here in the good old USA. Already Americans' economic, you can see this, I think, maybe even in your wonderful, wonderful room that you're all gathered together, so many of my friends, but Americans, the economic confidence is soaring like we haven't seen in many, many decades, maybe not at all. Upon my election, it was just announced that small business optimism skyrocketed by 41 points in a single month. That's the highest ever. There's never been anything like that.
His pitch to have companies make their products in America was similar to a more crude and exploitative version right after he was elected, basically telling businesses that they'll enjoy zero regulation and low taxes at the expense of the citizens that voted for him, as long as the companies coming in are willing to hand him $1 billion.
We're going to create the incentive theory again. In fact, I just announced yesterday, I didn't announce it for this reason, but anybody investing $1 billion or more gets a very expedited approval process because, you know, the approvals, when people come into the country, it takes them, in many cases, 14, 15, 16 years to get the approval. We'll try and push them as much as possible to get those permits very quickly, like a nuclear power plant. I would say a week would be enough time. What do you think? Is that okay?
And in case you don't want to give Trump $1 billion or have a trade war with him, there's always the ridiculous and childlike option of becoming a new state.
One thing we're going to be demanding is we're going to be demanding respect from other nations. Canada, we have a tremendous deficit with Canada. We're not going to have that anymore. We can't do it. I don't know if it's good for them. As you probably know, I say you can always become a state. And if you're a state, we won't have a deficit. We won't have to tariff you, et cetera, et cetera. But Canada has been very tough to deal with over the years. And it's not fair that we should have a $200 billion or $250 billion deficit. We don't need them to make our cars, and they make a lot of them. We don't need their lumber because we have our own forests, et cetera, et cetera. We don't need their oil and gas. We have more than anybody.
It's weird how he has demands for Canada, mixed in with outrageous exaggerations of a trade deficit that the country obviously knows the reality of. This comes with expectations for Americans to sit back and take whatever devastating economic results that come from his threats. But he only has a request for his friends in Saudi Arabia.
And I'm also going to ask Saudi Arabia and OPEC to bring down the cost of oil. You got to bring it down, which, frankly, I'm surprised they didn't do before the election. That didn't show a lot of love by them not doing it. I was a little surprised by that. If the price came down, the Russia-Ukraine war would end immediately. Right now, the price is high enough that war will continue. You got to bring down the oil price. You got to end that war. They should have done it long ago. They're very responsible, actually, to a certain extent, for what's taking place. Millions of lives are being lost. With oil prices going down, I'll demand that interest rates drop immediately, and likewise, they should be dropping all over the world. Interest rates should follow us.
I guess his campaign message of simply telling everyone what to do and expecting them to do it really is the strategy that he's decided to use. I just hope it works better than his promise to end the war between Russia and Ukraine, which oddly didn't happen in the first 24 hours after the election the way he said it would. But that's not his problem anymore.
Mr. President, when you're back here in Davos next year, will there be then a peace agreement with Ukraine and Russia by then?
Well, you're going to have to ask Russia. Ukraine is ready to make a deal. Just so you understand, this is a war that should have never started. If I were president, it would never have started.